Welcome everyone to Your Little Castle Show. We periodically have to deal with emergent events. There's always some kind of excitement in our community, but most recently we had a pretty hefty hailstorm. I actually put out a Facebook post video about it, and I ended up seeing all this storm. I got all this response, like people going, "Oh my gosh, the hail!" Because it was right here in our St. Charles area, close to where I live, and I was like, "Wow, this is kind of dangerous. This looks kind of crazy." And so I said, who can we call? We had to call one of the roofing experts in the St. Louis area. He's been a guest on our show. Everyone say hello to our guest. Everybody knows Charlie Schneider, Schneider Roofing and Remodeling. Yeah, so get that right, everybody. It's on the website behind us and on the Facebook page over to the side of us. But experts in the community. And so I said, who do I know? Like, you blew me away the last time with all the information you had with regard to your expertise and understanding of what it takes to get a roof properly managed, set up, so that people don't have problems going forward. And so, Charlie, welcome to the studio, and thanks for joining us.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. So with that, we visited a neighbor, and in the area that I knew, and I said, hey, I need. You were in this storm area. Tell us a little bit, if you would, neighbor, if you think there's damage. He said, oh yeah, I'm sure there is. Other people around me have had the damage. So with that. We went over and visited him. Charlie, tell us a little bit about the process here, and then we'll show some of the footage that we had with some of that.
Sure. So anytime we evaluate any property, what we're trying to do is establish a story to see if there is hail damage that's viable by the insurance. So one of the first things we want to look for is just kind of our hail map, make sure we're in an area that took hail, and then we'll try to do things like look for collateral damage, things that would be property, whether that be mailbox, gutters, siding, window screen, shutters, different things on the property that can be damaged from hail, and then ultimately go ahead and get on the roof. And so we were able to take the time to go over this property and kind of evaluate what we could find to tell a story if there was hail damage or not.
Well, like I said, that's when you get hail in a community, it's usually a hefty tab to be paid. Hopefully you have good insurance, and what we love is the fact that you're so knowledgeable about that whole process. And when we really got into this, we're like, I know that there's so much damage caused by hail. I experienced the tornado that came here many years ago. So my house where I reside, boy, they had a lot of stuff that went wrong in the roof and the siding and the deck. Just about everything had some damage to it. And so this hailstorm came through recently. Can you talk to us a little bit of the specifics with that hailstorm? And actually now I realize we were going to send a screenshot from your phone, but I might have you grab your phone at some point and get up. You guys have graphs that can show exactly how much damage, how large the hail was. And it took 1.5 inch in this area and 2.5 inch in that area. Talk to me a little bit about that and what you found in this last storm.
Yeah, so that's always an easy way to start, is just to pull a hail map. There's a lot of different software, a lot of different programs out there that can do that for you. So we'll normally just kind of go ahead and pull a hail map and check on the area. It will tell us the amount of hail we took and the date we took it. Just again, it kind of helps build that story to tell us if we're going into an area that has hail. And the hail in this time was a fairly large area. So to some degree, we kind of know just from being in neighborhoods and stuff, but it's still nice to have an individual address to look at and make sure that we're on a property that took hail.
Yeah, and when you get into this, what's the normal process? So somebody says, I've got hail that came through, but do they try to examine it themselves? I know we talked a little bit about that, and so often they're going, yeah, let me take a look at my own. Oh yeah, looks like there's nothing wrong, and then you find out years later. I mean, tell me a little bit about that, because that was kind of, when we had our discussion with our friend who allowed us to, Brooke, we'll have him on our video here in a minute. It almost looks like, oh yeah, that doesn't look too bad, right? Are people afraid
Sure.
to make claims? Tell me how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things can happen. So sometimes hail's super obvious. If you have a really old roof and it's going to show the marks really well, and that's kind of a no-brainer for everyone. Those are the great cases. But oftentimes hail isn't that obvious, especially right after a storm. Sometimes it can take several months for all the loose granules to wash their way out and to show the true damage. So someone that spends their whole life looking at and studying the hail and understanding the shingles, it's much easier to your eye to zone in on that. We see many people who look at their roof and it appears to be somewhat normal, and they don't make a claim, and then years later their roofs are just absolutely destroyed, and they wonder what happens. It normally was an unclaimed hail. So it's always great to have someone that's professional that understands hail to evaluate that first.
This shows the most recent storm, and this is these little yellow circles are where this kind of a ballpark where this happened for this last storm.
Right.
Is this going to validate what's going on there and some of what people can expect? Ballpark area for this is where the storm most recently hit, and this is where people.
Yeah, our latest storm was more of probably the largest area was in St. Charles, which you're kind of seeing right there by the river. But it crossed over the river into like the Earth City, Maryland Heights area as well. It hit small pockets in Wentzville and O'Fallon, small pockets. But definitely, if you're in the St. Charles by the river, you're pretty good chance that you have hail damage right now. And then, of course, this has been a hail season, so we've had other hailstorms already that were quite large just on the outskirts of the St. Louis market as well.
Okay. And I guess when I became urgent with this, I said, we got to do a special show to talk about this because this is the stuff that causes big damage quickly. And they talk about hail as one of the biggest, detriments to anybody that causes the kind of damage we're talking about. When these things hit, what's the step? What's the process? Help me with that. And then let's jump into that video, I guess, because we kind of went through that process a little bit with Brooke. Is that true?
Yeah. Again, the first process is always identifying if you have hail. A couple things can be hard because obviously the average homeowner isn't trained to know if you have hail. There are some obvious things, but then there are some less than obvious things. So oftentimes if you call your insurance company out first instead of a roofing company that you trust, it can count as a claim against you. So you have to be careful there. In most cases it doesn't, but it can count as a claim against you. So you want to at least have someone help you verify that you do have hail damage before just calling the 800 number. So it's always great to pick a roofer that you know and then have that evaluated. And then once that you're comfortable with your roofing company that you picked has estimated that there is damage, the next step would be contacting your insurance company and inviting them out and see if they share that same opinion to find out what the loss is on your property.
Okay, so let's jump in here. I'm going to show everybody this clip we had where we did a little walkthrough. Here we go.
All right, everybody, we're on a roof here in St. Charles. My friend Brooke here, we talked. He's got some damage from the storm, we think, and Charlie Schneider Roofing has come over to check it out. And so, Charlie, tell us a little bit about what you've learned about this roof.
We've already walked around the property and we've determined that there's collateral damage, meaning soft metals are damaged like gutters, downspouts. We saw breaks in the siding. So now we've made our way up onto the roof and we're just kind of seeing what we can find here with the roof and hail damage. So a couple things we're looking for is we're just looking for impalements in the roof. Generally it's gonna make what's called a bruise, and so we found a bruise right here. So you can kind of see where the rocks are driven into the mat, and then if you touch it, it's softer than everywhere else. So this is typical that the hail is gonna drive it in. We're gonna have granular loss. This is a fresh storm. It only happened about less than a week ago. After 4 or 5 months, this is gonna wash out. And a little less here, we can already see that the mat's cracking. We can see our crack and our circular motion. On this particular roof, we've already found stab wounds, which are not typical of hail, but here in St. Charles, the hail was 2 to 3 inches and it was real spiky. So on the back side, which is a little more dangerous to get to for filming, but we found about 5 or 6 stab wounds on the back side, and that he actually already has an interior leak from the stab wounds. So in this particular storm, we're looking for really small holes and stab wounds as well, which I don't see any on this particular slope, but on the back there's plenty of them.
Okay, so yeah, we saw where there's a bunch of damage around the side and on the gutters, and a number of cracks in the siding. So this is something definitely he should have a professional like yourself look at, and then you'll help him talk to the insurance company.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
So right there, yeah, that explains it. And it's a great example of somebody who actually has had some damage. It might be hard to detect. Tell me a little bit more about that and what you saw there, Charlie.
Yeah, so this one is a little bit newer roof. So new roofs obviously tend to hold up well. So they can be a little trickier. You need to kind of let your eyes settle in and do maybe a little bit better job of looking for the damage since the roof is newer. In this particular case, we saw some granular loss already. We saw a bruise in just that small little area, which gives us a good idea that we're definitely going to have hail damage throughout the rest of the roof.
Okay, yeah, and it's those things that happen to the roof that seem minuscule that all of a sudden. But I guess the bottom line for people, would it be best to say, hey, if you've had a big storm come through, call somebody that's got as many years of experience. How long has Schneider been in business now?
I think it's 30 something.
33 years, a long time. And that's why you need the guys who have done this as experts in the community that make a difference and know what they're talking about. And so how often is it the case that there's these, and we're not going to name any companies, but yeah, there's damage and there's not. And then they have another problem to deal with the insurance company with along those, or they get a claim charged against them, and how does that affect their insurance and those kinds of things when it wasn't even, how does a claim that doesn't go through, like you were talking about, call your roofing guy first, because if he's going to look at this, then he'll say whether to make a claim or not.
Yeah, it can be tricky. Most insurance companies will only count a claim against you if it's a payout. But there are insurance companies that do no-fault claims. So if you call and it's a zero payout, it still counts as a claim. It would be a no-fault claim counted against you. So if you have a couple other claims, it could ding you as someone that calls in the insurance way too often and could possibly get you a rate hike or even dropped. So you want to just be as careful as you can that you have legitimate hail before you get excited and just instantly call an insurance company.
Okay, and back to then, how do you identify these things? Because this is something unique. I had not heard the term before, and I've done a little roofing. I've got one of my buddies is a roofing guy, and then you get into this a little bit. But stab, essentially, is like somebody, the hail that came through this time looked like somebody just kind of stuck them. Normally, it's some kind of a hard hit where it looks like a rock just scraped across it and dented the shingle. But this is where like stab wounds, like somebody's poked a hole in it. And our buddy there, Brooke, said he was already having leaking coming from that. How does that work, and why is that different, this kind of storm we had this time?
Yeah, it's not super typical that we're going to have hail that's going to have spikes on the end of it. It would be more typical that your hail's more going to be somewhat round in shape. But when we get into larger hail, a lot of this area took 2 to 3 inch hail damage. It goes up and down in the atmosphere multiple different times, and each time it adds a little bit of formality to it. So when it gets big like that, it can be really weird and come down like a spike ball. And we were seeing that in this area. And so it literally stabs through the roof, and then of course it's ice, so it melts and then it's gone. But like we're finding these little tiny itty bitty holes that are eventually going to be found when it rains because it's going to start leaking through their house. But we've been on multiple properties now that have the stab wounds.
Okay, so let's take a look here, and I want to show everybody the next clip we've got. This is where we actually analyzed a few of these stab wounds, and when you talk about, that sounds so dangerous, a stab wound, but it looked like it was just pierced right through. You could just see a hole that went right into it, and that's something you definitely don't want to linger in your roof because that's going straight in. It's not like it wore over time. It's just like going straight in and injecting water into your house. We know what happens when water damage hits a house. Let's take a look at this clip real quick here. This is pretty interesting. All right, so Charlie, you've identified another one.
Yeah, so we do have a stab wound on this side too. They're really small, hard to find till the rain comes, and I'm assuming we'll find them pretty good then.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so we got to see some real live examples there, and it's like, wow. I mean, I just never seen anything like that because a lot of people are afraid of making a claim, and they're going, I don't want to call my insurance company because they're going to get me. This is where I'm going to put on the Cardinal Cowboy hat, and because we're all afraid as a community guy. We're saying, hey, I don't want my rates going up. I don't want to get charged again. I don't want. And tell me some of the implications behind it. When should somebody make a claim? Is it you have somebody come out and look always, and then you decide after you do that? Wow, I'm thinking when you're talking about a $15,000, $20,000 roof, you don't want to not. How many people haven't made a claim? They should have made a claim, and now they're in trouble, and they are not going to be covered. Talk about that for me a little bit, if you would.
Sure. So again, if you can find a roofing company you can trust, I mean, I'd lean on them as much as possible. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 incidents in a year. So it's not uncommon to have multiple incidents. So like I'm sure the roofing company would be glad to come out as often as you're asking them to, just to make sure that you have legitimate damage. So I would lean on them for the knowledge. That's what roofing companies, if you find one that is good and is going to do you hard work, then lean on that and let them help you. You do want to be careful to not wait too long. Insurance companies can reject the claim 6 months to a year, depending on the policy. Sometimes they're nice and they'll give you leniency on that, but you don't want to just sit back forever. Oftentimes with hail damage, you don't get leaks instantly, and so it might take 3, 4, 5 years before all the granules wash off your roof. But you'll notice in 2, 3, 4, 5 years that you have no roof left, and now it's too late. Like, you don't have a way to go back and say, hey, 5 years ago I had a hailstorm. So you really do want to have someone evaluate and not have a $10,000 or $15,000 loss sitting on the table. On the other aspect, we actually do hear a lot of people say they don't want to make a claim because they're afraid of rate hikes. We found that most of the time, if you're in a hail area, you're going to get rate hiked. It's like everything. They use algorithms and how much they pay out in a neighborhood. So if you look around and all your neighbors are getting roofs, you're probably getting rate hiked. It's just going to work that way. Like, your neighborhood now became more risky. So, if that's the only reason you're not making a claim, it's probably going to work against you. But in honesty, if you have damage, you should just make a claim either way, whether you're going to get rate hiked or not. Because if you have a bad roof, you have a bad roof. And once your roof is bad and it's leaking, now you could have bad insulation, bad drywall. If it's really, really bad, you could have bad furniture, bad carpet. Like, the roof is really important. So if it's damaged, you need to make that claim.
Okay, now you're hitting on a couple things that actually hit home with me a little bit, because I have a good friend. The whole neighborhood got hit. They did not make a claim. They came back 2 years later and said, hey, can you take a look at this? And then went through the process. And it was interesting because I won't say the name of the insurance company, but we know they covered a house 2 houses over, and then they didn't cover this particular person's house. Is it just that happened and not have been as much damage, or was it a matter of now they're saying, are they more likely? I guess we're making the argument that if everybody else getting this done, you better get in. Don't be afraid because they're going to raise your rates. They're going to raise everybody's rates anyway. And then if you don't claim it, you try to come back later, then they might go, yeah, we already went through this. We covered everything we're going to cover. Is that something people need to be considerate of when they're thinking about this?
Yeah, I mean, you just, again, if you possibly have insurance damage, you don't want to sit on it, because roofs are expensive, and that's what insurance is there for, to help you through that process when something catastrophic happens to your home. So, if you just take a naked eye and look up there and it's like, it looks good and I don't want to make a claim, but you see a lot of other roofs in the neighborhood, there's probably should have a good suspicion that you need to go ahead and get a roofer out there and evaluate that more careful. On the reverse of what you said, though, it doesn't happen often. But I've been in neighborhoods where 9, 10, 12, 15 houses get bought, and then you go on one, and for whatever reason, there's legitimately no damage. And it makes no sense how it can skip a house. It doesn't happen often, but there are rare cases where you're the one person in the whole neighborhood who doesn't have hail damage. Again, it's rare, but I have seen that a few times where the storm has done whatever it does. It swirls and somehow misses a house or two and then goes right back. So it can be that you're the weird person on the neighborhood, but most likely you just didn't make a hail claim.
Yeah, so don't wait around for this. Don't wait too long, because you said between 6 and 12 months generally, and then they're like, you missed it. You've seen houses where there was, I've heard this before, where they had damage. They didn't fix everything. Like, they've got some of the air vents or some of the stuff on top of the roof, and then those got beat up. They were part of the claim. They didn't replace them because they didn't have to be replaced. And then they have a storm come later, and they say, nope, you should have got that finished the first time, or else, because that was a part of the original claim. Is that a problem people have to think about too?
Yeah, anytime you don't do all of the work, it makes it uninsurable for the next time. So if your gutters were damaged in a storm 5 years ago and you kept the money for the gutters, that's legal. You can do that. But now your gutters are off limit. So when there's a new hailstorm, you'll get a roof, but you're not going to get gutters a second time because you didn't put new gutters on. Or steel components on the roof, as you were mentioning. There are things like that where people choose to keep the money. Again, that is legal, but it does make that off limits for until it's replaced and brought to new. So yeah, they're going to come out and be like, well, we'll pay for your roof, but not for your gutters, not for your vents, not for the mailbox because it's the same mailbox from last time. So you just have to be aware if you do that, that you've now made it off limits for the next storm.
Okay, something always to consider, and a lot of that stuff goes in until you talk to a professional. That's why we wanted to have Charlie on here, everybody, because when you get to some of the experts, I've talked to a lot of guys, and they all know their stuff, but this guy really knows this stuff. Let's talk about, we're going to finish up the discussion we had with Brooke, and kind of how the summation of what we talked about, and the summary for what you guys kind of came to a conclusion with right here. Is that all right?
Sure.
All right.
So we got hail damage to the siding. This is typical where the hail hits, it's going to break it. So we're looking for chips and breaks in the siding. Window screens, downspouts we're looking for. The sun's not helping us right now as we're kind of in the shade. So we would generally chalk this. We can see on the neighbor's house where the sun's hitting now. Now we have it on all the downspouts.
Yeah, you can see those dents up and down. Okay. So as you summarize all of this, what would your recommendation be?
So at this point, we would just ask our homeowner to go ahead and call his insurance company, and he'll call their 800 number typically. Sometimes if he has a really good agent, the agent will ask to have a phone call first before calling the 800 number. So whatever they're most comfortable with, and they'll go ahead and call it in as a hail claim in this particular case. And then the insurance company will set a date. We like to meet with the insurance company and just go over the damage. It's not really the homeowner's responsibility to know what hail damage is. So we like to meet with the insurance company and just show them. 90% of the time they're really good. They don't need to be shown. They know what to do. Every now and then you get a cranky person and they need a little assistance. That's what we're there for on the cranky days, but most of them are really good and things go along without too much problem at all. But we are here to assist the homeowner, not the insurance company, as that's our customer. So
Good deal.
I like that.
All right. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks,
you.
Charlie.
Thank you for coming.
We'll be back for more.
Okay, so with that, it seemed Brooke was pretty happy with the discussion because and somebody that also didn't know the damage that was there. Kind of appeared to be okay, and then after we talked about it, and it's just, wow, this is stuff that people need to be serious about because it becomes something. And so he was very surprised, it almost seemed. How often is that the case, and how does this go after that now?
Well, I guess it kind of depends on where you're at in the storm. So in this particular case, we're not even a week into the storm. So a lot of people are surprised. Probably in a month from now, when you look down your neighborhood and there's roofing trucks at every other house, people are less surprised. They start making that phone call themselves like, hey, everyone else is getting a roof. Maybe something happened to mine. So you may be less surprised at that point, but in this particular case, I didn't see a lot of roofing trucks in the neighborhood yet. We're not seeing a lot of roofs installed. It's still very early. We probably don't have insurance companies on the roof yet getting those approvals, but I would imagine in a month from now, there'll be a different scenario going down the street, and people will be like, oh, I think I should call someone. So it's just a process.
Okay, well, and that's just something, again, as I saw this come through, and had I not experienced it almost, like I said, firsthand, because I'm looking out the window of my house and I'm going, there's this stuff coming down. It is hitting hard. It's not huge. I didn't realize, and another thing, I want to get that, we'll pull your phone up. If you want to grab your phone, I got the camera on me, but pull up that image you've got, but they can gauge and they know exactly how large the hail is that hit through our area. And that was a surprise to me because I looked at the hail as it hit my deck and hit the siding in our neighborhood for the area that we were at. Here it is, and I'll put this up for everybody. But I thought it was a ½ inch to an inch, and you're showing right here, and I'm going to put this on our wide cam here, and then I can zoom in. So let me keep this right there. There we go. So right on, there you go. You can actually see that. This is telling us the exact size hail that there were out there, right? How does it, help me read what
Yeah,
this
so
says?
if we go down just a little bit here, so the at location is the green, so we had ½ inch hail at location, but within a mile of this area, we had 1.25 inch hail. So, it doesn't mean that you only had the ½ inch hail, but it's verified you had at least ½ inch hail in this market at this particular address that we pulled. but they could have had up to 1.25 inch hail, which that's a good size diameter. So yeah, that's some good hail.
I'm trying to imagine what we've got going down when you've got a piece of. If you guys remember when we were kids and we were all kind of mean to each other, and we'd make that ice ball out of snow, and it was so hard. I mean, this is where people got injured. I didn't ever do that, of course, but these things were. I mean, you've got one that was this big around, you could knock somebody out with that. So these things like that, imagine 1,000 of those coming down on you, an inch. I was like, half an inch, 2 inches. Now you're starting to talk about some stuff, and then I understand in this area that we're talking about, there were 3 inch pieces that were coming around. Is that normal? Is that something we see very often?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen larger storms like that in this market. We do get it. I remember when we got it in Spanish Lake many years ago, Florissant, Blackjack, we had hail like that. So we can get that kind of hail, but generally we're seeing like 1 inch and less hail in our market. So this was a bigger storm.
Okay, and this is what people need to be wary of. Well, we wanted to have somebody come in and talk to us as an expert, and I picked up the phone. You were the first guy I called, and I said, Charlie, talk to us about this, because this is stuff that and it was interesting because, like I said, I felt like, and I've looked at my own roof and I saw what I saw, but then right around the corner, I'm talking to friends, and I'm like, hey, let's look at your house. This is where we went over to our buddy, and I had never seen these spike things. It literally looked like, as you guys saw that video, take a look here, everybody, look back, rewind, and look at this. It looks like somebody just took a knife and just stabbed right in there and took out punctured a hole in it. And what do you only need 3 of those or 4, one of those, I guess. And all of a sudden now you got and then underneath and mold and just destroys everything. Is that how that ends up going?
Yeah, that's what's going to be hard, because I don't know that you're going to necessarily be able to find every stab wound. They're so small. So this is a little more tricky than it maybe normally is. But, on a lot of these, we kind of know something's going on, because when you're rolling up, you're already seeing the broken siding. You're already seeing the damaged gutters. So we got a pretty good idea that we're going to have a damaged roof when we're just rolling up on a house and seeing that. So most of these areas with the spike hail, we're seeing multiple other things broke. So if people will just walk around their house, look for broken siding, look for ripped screens, look for big dings in the gutter, they'll probably get a pretty good idea that they got roof damage.
Well, we want to show everybody your website. You do have a page dedicated to, there was your fan page, but this is a page you have dedicated to hail damage. If you go to Schneider Roofing and Remodeling.com. These are experts, everybody. Schneider Roofing and Remodeling.com. Do that Google search, you'll find them. And it's great to have somebody who's such an expert come into our studio and talk about this, because I know you can destroy somebody's house if you don't get this taken care of correctly. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, roofing can be, when roofing's done wrong, it can be a nightmare. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is the Your Little Castle Show, and we've got our expert here talking hail damage, and all of what you don't want to have to deal with. But when you do, get somebody here who is an expert. Stay tuned. Giddy up.